I think we would see less of an exposition.
I completely agree with that. What do you guys think?
But why?
Because we see that as the groups split apart, there's more conflict from group to group. So if the groups split apart earlier, there would be more conflict throughout the beginning of the book.
Yeah, but like, would that like necessarily make it more like the conflicts more severe later in the book? Because you know how like they kill each other and stuff in Lord of the Flies, but will they start to kill each other even more? Like eliminate almost like a genocide, but like.
Well, I think
what's
it's
that?
entirely possible that the groups kind of split apart and then start kind of dehumanizing the other group, right? Because it's like fear of the other, like xenophobia, which you see someone other than you and assume that because they're not like you, they're bad. So if you see someone with a different culture, well, you might start to dislike them. This is where stereotypes come from, right? Like you might assume that some cultures have certain bad things about them, and so they might attribute that to the other boys, which would lead to them wanting to attack and hurt them.
Especially from where they're from, because London is generally a place with more, like, with less of an ethnic background. So it's, I guess they wouldn't be used to sort of the diversity of the other cultures and languages.
Back to the exposition thing, I don't think that would be necessarily true because I think one of the main things that happened was the initial shock of just being on the island, and I don't think that would defer. I think that they would still like try to work together initially, and which causes the main exposition. So I don't think that would initially change.
Well, I completely agree with that. But I think that one of the conflicts we see earlier in the book is Ralph and Jack kind of struggling for power. And if hypothetically Ralph spoke one language and Jack spoke another, then there wouldn't really be a struggle. It would be more just people kind of default to whatever language they speak.
Yeah. They wouldn't have more of a divide because they wouldn't be able to communicate as well.
I completely agree.
I mean, they could use like hand gestures or something.
Well, yeah,
Like,
but it's a lot
they could
easier to just...
communicate other than
Yeah,
words.
that's
Like
like basically creating another language.
Like
But
that.
if we happen to be stranded on an island, I would generally hang out with people who also spoke whatever language I speak.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's just a lot simpler.
Like although the groups may be split from languages, I believe that they'll follow like a common trend. Like if one group is starting to like make huts, for example, the other groups may start to follow because they do have eyes and they can see, and they would probably just follow in suit, like in society today. It's not like FOMO, not like fear of missing out, but it's more of just follow what the other groups are doing according to like innovation and stuff.
Also, I just think that since we know that the story occurs relatively soon after World War II, if hypothetically like one group spoke English and another group spoke German, like we might see some divides there just from cultural stuff.
So we've been talking about how if they had different languages, they would probably divide into different groups. But what if initially they had like something like a dictionary that would kind of replace the conch, which in The Lord of the Flies symbolize authority and let people talk when they wanted to talk, when they had the meetings. So what if they had a dictionary that would help them like have a voice and be able to translate people with different languages?
I guess it would like be sort of like a relic or something that they have to like worship or like save. Because they have to, if they want any chance of surviving, they're gonna have to work together. Because there's no way that one.
But for 12-year-olds, 6 to 12-year-olds, they're not gonna go. If someone tells you a sentence in a whole different language, you're not gonna go through the dictionary word by word to figure out what they're saying. I feel like.
But they would
Let's
still...
just say
Maybe more symbolic.
Well, I think they would still perhaps be able to, like, let's say you make hand gestures, and then if you need to say something complicated, like a certain word, you can look it up. Because at some point, people would learn, like, hi, like the very basic syntax of the language. I think another thing that we have to consider is how some languages might come off as sort of aggressive. For example, if you spoke language to someone without them knowing what you were saying, it might come off as aggressive, like they were being offensive or an attack, which might lead to the groups clashing for no good reason.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Sometimes you don't know what they're saying, and like obviously you can't translate it with if you even if you had the dictionary, you wouldn't be able to translate it almost immediately. And I think it would cause groups to like go against each other if like one group becomes aggressive and if someone else responds to that, then
Yeah.
it could obviously cause a reaction.
It definitely causes like an intimidation factor that we don't really see happening in the original Lord of the Flies.
I mean, like with most fears, wouldn't you get over that tone of aggressiveness, like anger that you hear from the other group?
Well, not if you don't understand it.
Yeah, if you just
Yeah.
think they're constantly angry at you and yelling
And
at you
especially if you have
because
something
can't-
else to dislike about them, then you might be like predisposed to
More
think like, oh, they're doing
prone to
something
be-
wrong.
Also, clarifying question: the dictionary is for which languages? Because it's not for all languages.
Multi-language.
It's not all of them. It's for
It's
one
probably-
language, so it is one way. So we can assume that they can like.
Dictionaries work both ways.
Yeah,
Because if you have two words in a dictionary, you can just go back and forth.
yeah.
There's
I
no such
know.
thing as a one-way dictionary.
Okay, but if there are 3 languages, then not
Oh,
all
okay.
3
Yeah,
languages
yeah,
are going to be in the book.
Yeah.
And also like I think it's hard because especially with like some dictionaries it's alphabetical. It would be alphabetical for your language and then it would go into the other language. The other person wouldn't know where to find their the other person might not know where to find your like the word that you're saying because they don't know your alphabet or they just don't know how it's spelled.
I mean, like you can, but you can just show them the word that you said, right?
That's fair.
So that's like an easier solution.
Yeah, but
Okay, but back to
some
the-
written languages, like they're written differently, so they may not be able to understand the
Yeah,
letters.
like Arabic, for example, it's
Yeah.
just follow.
Oh yeah.
Like if it was an English to Arabic dictionary, then you would probably not be able to read both of them.
Well,
Well,
most
sure,
dictionaries also
it's
have
complicated,
things
but-
that are spelled underneath.
But no one says you have to use perfect grammar. Like you can say, I eat food. And however, you can say another language. If you say I and eat and food, it won't sound perfect, but you're at least going to get a meaning
Yeah.
class, and that's all you need to do here.
Yeah, it won't sound good to you, but to them it makes
It'll
sense.
work.
Because you use separate words.
Yeah.
Were you gonna suggest something?
Because you said how they can help each other by showing what word you wanted to say in the dictionary. But going back to the power, like the division of each group and like aggression towards each other, if one sounded more aggressive, then I think the chance of them showing or like helping each other figure out the
Yeah.
word is more unlikely.
Yeah, it's more unlikely because they're not willing to like be near or even
Like less
interact with
empathetic.
each other, right? Yeah, yeah.
And even if they did interact, then it wouldn't be in the nicest manner, which also can cause more like.
Yeah, but like with that though, like having a dictionary with one group having the dictionary as we assume, how would that dictionary be useful? Because with that one group being primarily one language, then that dictionary wouldn't be so like it wouldn't have as much potential as it could if it
Yeah.
was spread across like the other
Well,
groups.
it's another thing where like, we can assume that the dictionary belongs to someone. So in a sense, it's like the conch,
Yeah.
and like, and it's not really supposed to have like, it's not really supposed to be super helpful to everybody.
It just gives
And-
the owner of.
Yeah, it gives the person who owns it like privilege and stuff, and also because it does belong to someone, and they might not even want to share it in that sense.
But I feel like groups might use a language as an excuse to fight.
Why? Why do you think that?
Well, I agree with Luke because, again, they would see it as cultural differences and xenophobia. Say you agree.
Well, I also agree with Ben.
Another thing I would change would also be like sort of a cultural aspect. So let's say in the pig scene where they killed the pig. In other cultures such as the Muslim culture, pigs are seen as like dirty or as unclean. So I don't know. I just think that it would change.
The way the scene played out.
Yeah.
I agree, especially because if I know in some cultures that they won't even eat meat or like fasting, so they might not even like want to kill the pig in that sense. So it definitely changes the dynamic of that scene. especially with how we know it was a very like brutal and like big turning point. So it would probably the retelling would probably like replace that with something that is like equally of a turning point, but I don't think it would be the same as in like killing that pig.
Yeah, and overall, I believe the language would change in the book, the tone and all, because telling from that perspective of that Muslim group or like that religious group, they probably would like even avoid the pig. They might mention it like a few times because like it's like an animal they're trying to avoid, right?
Well, I think the other thing to consider, let's say some of them were Christian, right?
Okay.
So there's the, I believe, Catholic idea of like no sex before marriage, so they probably wouldn't be talking about it in terms of like sexual assault and stuff like that, because they
Yeah.
wouldn't really understand that. So I think that the language they used would certainly change.
That's-
Definitely.
And then I think the other bit would be that, for example, since the author knew what the Lord of the Flies was, and that may be a reference to some Catholic concept or some Christian concept, right? That might indicate that he kind of knew what he was talking about. And if the kids were very devout, that might change.
I also think it wouldn't though, because it's more for the reader, the way he phrased everything. So even if they were like super religious, I feel like maybe the pig would change, but like it would, instead of using the pig, maybe they would just use a different like thing or animal to represent the turning point.
I think it's also a thing where like you also have to realize that the severity of the language is also something that that is mainly for the readers. So there are obviously other things that could represent the turning point and have that same severity. Because if it was like just a movie, like I don't think it would have the same importance. I don't think the same scene would have the same importance in the movie at first glance, just because of the way it looks. Obviously, the implications come from the wording that we get to read.
Okay, another point is how when people are really devoted to the religion.
Yeah.
Okay, so like how in the book, the boys go savage and they kind of act animal-like, and just like killing whatever there is in their path. People who are like really devoted to their religion and like who just follow their religion, like they do what they think their God tells them to do. Sometimes they can act on that and don't really keep realistic factors in their mind, and like just them acting on what they learn from the religion could cause them to just be really mindful of their surroundings. Causing harm to themselves and potentially others around them.
So you're saying they would be so blindly devoted, they would lose sense of rhythm?
Yeah, basically.
Let's wrap this up, guys. Let's transition to the next topic.